Dine 다 단다 당보 rangi che namba kankala tashi dili shugiyana. Dine 다 대양 jerdu che namba kankala 다 je Gampopa.
I'd like to begin by greeting all of you, welcoming you, and congratulating you. The reason why I wish to congratulate all of you is that, according to Lord Gampopa, the first of the 4 Dharmas is the mind going to the Dharma. The fact that all of you are here indicates that all of your minds have already gone to the Dharma. In this you are extremely fortunate. The evidence of this is simply that you have come here to listen to Dharma teachings. In particular, this place to which you have come for this purpose is this extraordinary seat founded by His Holiness the 16th Karmapa, which he actually visited and actually blessed and consecrated himself. The reason why His Holiness did this is because of his great aspiration to satisfy the needs and wishes of those many with faith in and wish to practice the Dharma throughout North America. For their benefit, he found this place, consecrated it, and visited it. Since that time, this seat, this monastery, has been used without break or cease for the teaching and practice of Dharma. So I feel very fortunate to have the opportunity to talk about Lord Gampopa's 4 Dharmas in such a place, and I consider that all of you are fortunate to have come here out of your devotion to Dharma, and that is why I congratulate you.
Dine 다 대양 지당가 왕도제나 다 단다 dine che namba dambi chuju gole huba 대양 kallasam.
You are all fortunate in having entered the gate of Dharma to begin with, but in particular, you are most fortunate in having entered the gate of the Dharma of the Kagyu, from among the many great traditions of Dharma that exist. And it is of special significance that you have done so. Now, when I say that you are especially fortunate in having entered the Dharma gate of the Kagyu, this is not mere sectarianism. I am not simply saying this because I am Kajupa, and therefore saying, it's great that you're Kajupa because I'm Kajupa and we're better. That would be inappropriate. The reason why I say this is that the Kagyu possess unique instructions, and because entering the Dharma gate of the Kagyu tradition gives you access to these instructions, we are all extremely fortunate in having done so. About this, Lord Naropa made the following prediction to Lord Marpa. He said, "Son, the later disciples will be even greater than the earlier ones. Now, this is significant because normally when we think about the passage of a spiritual tradition through time, we assume that over time it becomes weakened. We assume that a disciple will never equal their master, and therefore that with each generation, the realization will diminish. What Naropa was saying is that the opposite was going to happen to his lineage. Now, what did he mean? He meant that even greater than Lord Marpa was Jetsun Milarepa, Marpa's disciple. And even greater than Jetsun Milarepa was Lord Gampopa, Milarepa's disciple. Now, what makes these beings so great? There are many reasons. Principal among these is the increasing diversity and profundity of instructions presented by these masters, and the fact that these beings were great bodhisattvas. Lord Gampopa in particular was an extraordinary bodhisattva who had a tremendous power of aspiration, backed by his accumulation of merit throughout innumerable lifetimes. And these too caused his instructions to be especially powerful.
Tene tateya tatemba zobu sonji jamden deji ndo tinzin jalbodan hinjepe makabu niganane je Gampopa long tembarela.
Lord Gampopa was predicted by our teacher, the Buddha, in both the Lotus Sutra and the Samadhiraja Sutra. In these, he not only predicted Gampopa's appearance, but he also described Gampopa's previous lives and his accumulation of merit during these, and explained the reason of why Gampopa would arise. The principal or best known prediction of Lord Gampopa is in the Samadhiraja Sutra. And the reason for this is connected with the subject of the sutra itself. As the name of the sutra indicates, the sutra is concerned with the explanation of the most profound or the supreme samadhi. Now, what is taught in that sutra is the same as what Lord Gampopa later taught as the instructions of Mahamudra, which constitute the instructions in that which is greatest among all samadhis. And Gampopa taught Mahamudra widely. His many disciples practiced it and realized it and passed it down, and in that way it has been realized and passed down generation after generation. Now, the sutra itself was taught by the Buddha on Vulture Peak Mountain, and nearby in the town of Rajgir there lived a bodhisattva who was called a Youthful Moonlight. And it was the bodhisattva Youthful Moonlight who requested the teaching of the Samadhiraja Sutra from the Buddha. In response to that request, the Buddha taught this sutra. At the end of the sutra, the Buddha asked a question. While it was understood, obviously, that during the Buddha's lifetime, Dharma would continue to flourish, there was always the question, who would teach it during the age of degeneracy? So the Buddha asked the assembly, those who would receive the instruction from him, who among you will promise to teach this sutra in the future during the age of degeneracy? Youthful Moonlight arose from his seat and made the promise, in the future I will teach this sutra. The Buddha, in response, said, you will be able to do so. The reason is because of your tremendous accumulation of merit and your special cultivation of samadhi throughout innumerable aeons. In particular, at that point, the Buddha described one of the previous lives of this bodhisattva, which was as the bodhisattva Beautiful Moonflower. And Beautiful Moonflower was a bodhisattva who possessed extraordinary compassion. He engaged in the practice of samadhi in isolation, and having achieved it, he began to teach. First, he taught his immediate retinue, and then he started to teach more and more people, benefiting and blessing tremendously all of those whom he taught. Eventually, he started going from town to town, and in the towns he attracted many followers, those who had faith in him and those who came to develop samadhi themselves. Finally, he went to the palace of the local ruler or king. The reason why he had to go to the palace was normally people who live in palaces of kings, which are, generally speaking, very luxurious, are so distracted by the affluence and luxury of their situation that they are unable to practice Dharma. For the benefit of the residents of the palace, this bodhisattva went into the king's palace. Nevertheless, it's a very dangerous thing to go into a king's palace to teach meditation. In spite of that danger, this bodhisattva did so, which is an indication of how unselfish he was. Teaching in the king's palace, as had happened elsewhere, he started to attract more and more disciples, all of whom had great faith in him and cultivated excellent samadhi. Eventually, he went into the residence of the queens, and this residence was normally forbidden to people like himself. As he taught the many queens of that king, they all gained faith in him and came to practice samadhi, which upset the king very much, who became quite jealous. He decided to punish beautiful Moonflower, and he did so by cutting off his hands and feet. Now, when this was done, the bodhisattva not only did not get angry, but he made an aspiration, appealing to the power of words of truth. As a result, he exhibited the miracle of, rather than blood flowing from his severed limbs, milk flowing forth. When he saw this, the king was somewhat awestruck and realized that he'd made a mistake and developed great faith in that bodhisattva. Eventually, when the bodhisattva passed away, the king enshrined and venerated his relics. When he finished telling this story, the Buddha pointed out that that king was a previous birth of he himself, Buddha Shakyamuni, and the bodhisattva, beautiful Moonflower, was a previous birth of the present bodhisattva, youthful Moonlight. He said that it was because in that way, in that life as beautiful Moonflower and in other lives, that this bodhisattva had assiduously cultivated samadhi. It was because of this that he had the good fortune to request and receive the teachings of this sutra. In telling this story of the distant past, the Buddha was explaining the reason why the bodhisattva, youthful Moonlight, would be able in the future to teach the contents of the Samadhiraja Sutra. He was going to be able to do this because of his tremendous virtuous aspiration, his practice of samadhi, and his selfless austerities. The Buddha also mentioned at that time that although at the present, that is to say during the Buddha's lifetime, his teachings had not spread to Tibet, that they would do so in the future, and that subsequent to that there would appear an incarnation of youthful Moonlight who would bear the name or title of monk physician, and that this monk physician would widely teach the Samadhiraja Sutra's contents. Now, the person the Buddha referred to as the monk physician is Lord Gampopa, whom we often refer to even nowadays as Dagpo Laje, or the physician from Dagpo. The reason we call Gampopa the physician from Dagpo is that in his youth he was a physician, and in later life, of course, he became a monastic and a great Dharma teacher. Therefore, in predicting him, the Buddha referred to him as the monk physician. So the Buddha's prediction was a prediction of Gampopa's teaching of Mahamudra, which is the essence of what the Buddha had originally taught in the Samadhiraja Sutra. And in accordance with that prediction, Lord Gampopa took birth, appeared, and taught. Now, of course, his predecessors in our lineage, Lords Marpa and Milarepa, had already appeared. What makes Gampopa so important is that his instructions were even more profound than those of his predecessors, in that they combined not only the teachings he had received from Milarepa, but also those that came from the lineage of Lord Atisha. Because of this combination, Gampopa was able to present Mahamudra in different ways: the Mahamudra of Sutra, the Mahamudra of Tantra, and the Mahamudra which is the unification of Sutra and Tantra. Because of these ways of teaching, Lord Gampopa had many disciples, all of whom practiced Mahamudra, gained siddhi through its practice, and transmitted it. Through teaching Mahamudra, Lord Gampopa came to have an extraordinary number of disciples. For example, it's taught in the Ocean of Songs of the Kagyu Fathers that he had no less than 800 disciples who assiduously devoted themselves solely to the intensive practice of meditation. In that way, Lord Gampopa was able to benefit beings tremendously. Now, all of those who were his disciples during his lifetime obviously encountered him directly. They met him, they heard his speech, his teachings directly, and so on. But he was also concerned with the benefit of those who were his indirect disciples, those who would take birth in the future and therefore not be able to physically encounter him or directly hear his teachings from his own voice or speech. For the benefit of people like this, people such as ourselves, he wrote his various shastras or commentaries. He said that the extensive presentation of his teachings was the jewel ornament of liberation, the intermediate presentation, the precious garland of the supreme path, and the most brief presentation, what we now call the four Dharmas. He said about these three presentations of his teachings that anyone in the future who should come to think with regret, "Alas, I was unable to meet the peerless Gampopa," if they should merely encounter these teachings of Mahamudra, their encounter with these teachings would be no different in any way from meeting Lord Gampopa himself. Because of this power and blessing of these teachings, at best, we should study the jewel ornament of liberation, or if not, at least the precious garland of the supreme path. But even the study of the most concise presentation of Gampopa's teachings, these four Dharmas, is of tremendous benefit. Because these are phrased as a prayer or supplication, we often think of them merely as something for liturgical use. But whether we chant these as a prayer, or hear them as instruction, or attempt to practice them intensively, in any case, we have encountered them. And in encountering these teachings, it is no different from meeting Lord Gampopa himself face to face. In fact, we could even go further, because since the Buddha said that the teachings within the Samadhiraja Sutra were his most profound instruction, and since these teachings are what we now know to be Lord Gampopa's Mahamudra presentation, then in encountering these teachings, it is not only the same as encountering Lord Gampopa himself, it is the same as encountering the Buddha himself. For these reasons, I feel extraordinarily fortunate in having this opportunity to discuss these things with you. Mahamudra instruction can be presented to and can be practiced by beginners. And it also needs to be practiced by everyone else, including those who have achieved high states of realization. In fact, it is principally Mahamudra that must be cultivated until you finally achieve perfect Buddhahood, perfect awakening. Because it is Mahamudra that brings progress and improvement that leads to that final result. Regardless of how far along you get in the path, you will never get to the point where you will have outgrown Mahamudra, where you will have used it up or surpassed its instructions. And there is really nothing other than Mahamudra that is essentially necessary in order to achieve the final result of the path. Because in this way, Mahamudra is regarded as the ultimate means by which Buddhahood is achieved, some people have felt that it is so profound that it cannot or should not be taught to beginners. This is incorrect. It is not Mahamudra that we should avoid teaching beginners. What we should not be teaching beginners is modes of bizarre conduct, such as the conduct which is victorious in all directions, or the conduct of the discipline of awareness. Teaching such modes of extraordinary conduct is indeed inappropriate, as these are dangerous for beginners. But teaching Mahamudra to beginners is not inappropriate, because there is no danger in its practice. After all, the practice of Mahamudra consists simply of resting in the direct experience of the nature of your own mind, and, in addition, supplicating the root and lineage gurus. There is no danger in doing this. One of two things will happen. Either the person will realize the nature of their mind, or they won't. If they do realize the nature of their mind, that's not dangerous, that's great. And if they don't realize the nature of their mind, that's also not dangerous, because their attempt to do so, combined with their faith in this most profound among all Dharma, will cause the blessing of Mahamudra to definitely enter into their hearts. When you practice it, whether you realize it now or not, you will definitely begin a process of gradual progress and improvement that will eventually culminate in perfect realization. Furthermore, anyone who has already achieved some degree of realization, and there must be some among you for whom this is true, needs to practice Mahamudra, because it is through the practice of Mahamudra that your realization will be increased, and that the remaining impediments which obstruct or prevent omniscient wisdom will be removed. You must continue to practice Mahamudra until you achieve Buddhahood. There is no one who will not be benefited by the practice of Mahamudra. For example, if someone is an experienced practitioner of the profound path of the 6 Dharmas of Naropa, or is commencing such practice, in either case, that person definitely needs the view and meditation of Mahamudra. To practice the 6 Dharmas of Naropa without the view and meditation of Mahamudra is not going to work, and in fact might lead to some problems. This view is needed. Or, if you are a practitioner of the Great Perfection, the view of Mahamudra is needed as well. The Great Perfection has 2 aspects: the practice of primordial purity, which is called breakthrough, and the practice of spontaneous presence, which is called leapover. Of these, the first, the practice of breakthrough, or primordial purity, is essentially the same as Mahamudra. It consists of the recognition or identification of the mind's nature, meditating on it, and realizing it. It's said within the Great Perfection tradition that if someone attempts to practice leapover without first having a good practice of primordial purity, of breakthrough, although they may see the appearances of leapover, it will not do them much good. So a practitioner of leapover requires, whether they are practicing the practice of light or the practice of darkness, requires the view and practice of Mahamudra. Whether you call it Mahamudra or breakthrough doesn't matter, it's the same thing. Without this, the practices of leapover will not be of much benefit. So, anyone doing any advanced practice, for example, Kajupas doing the practices of Chandali and the illusory body, needs the view and meditation of Mahamudra. When these advanced practices are combined with this view and meditation, their appropriate results and the signs of those results will occur. Without the view and meditation of Mahamudra, not much is going to happen. So even those with extraordinary levels and experience of practice require Mahamudra as the essence of their practice. It is all the more true that those who lack experience in practice need principally to engage in and aspire to the practice of Mahamudra.
Tene ta te ya ta tanda ngaranzo luting on siena ji pitin na yong rong pe mi ji tin na yong rong
Anyone can practice Mahamudra. It doesn't matter whether you have a male body or a female body, whether you are a monastic or a lay person. Essentially, the practice of Mahamudra is the cultivation of discernment. We could say it is the cultivation of what is commonly called the perfection of discernment. In the Sutra of the Heart of the Perfection of Discernment, it says, Shariputra, a son or daughter of family who wishes to practice the perfection of discernment, should examine in this way. Now, what is pointed out here is not only that anyone can practice this, but that the one real criterion, the one real prerequisite, is to have interest in Dharma. As it says, someone who wishes to practice this. Without this interest, without this devotion to Dharma, of course you won't practice. With this interest, you can and will. So, in your practice and study of the 4 Dharmas of Gampopa, try to cultivate faith for the root and lineage gurus, devotion to them and devotion to the instructions of Mahamudra itself, and within that state, practice. His Holiness the 16th Jawang Karmapa caused this monastery to be built because he knew that people would come here to listen to Dharma, and not just to listen to it, but actually practice it, and not just practice it, but actually achieve the result of Dharma practice, and that through their doing so, it would be established here so that Dharma would come to flourish in this place generation after generation. That is why, to begin with, he blessed this land. So, if you're practicing here, if you supplicate His Holiness the Jawang Karmapa and practice within that attitude of supplication, I feel that the results will be extraordinarily great. It is for that reason that I thank all of you for your listening to Dharma and your practice of Dharma. And with that, we'll conclude for this evening.